Dear friends, welcome to this first webinar of CineConf, powered by IMAX in association with TheatreWorld and Network 208. In today's topic, we shall discuss about big screen entertainment and impact of coronavirus lockdown. For this conversation, we have three speakers. First is Mr. Alok Tandon, CEO of INOX Leisure. INOX is India's second largest multiplex chain with close to 600 plus screens spread across. Alok has been responsible for making INOX Leisure achieve an aggressive position in the market share with a continued business growth. And our second speaker is Mr. Kiran Reddy, CEO of SPI Group. SPI Group based in Chennai. Kiran recently sold his cinema exhibition business to PVR Cinemas. An engineer and MBA by education, Kiran has the eye of innovation, high service standards and experimental design. Sometime back, it was known that Kiran was the first new technology adopter in India. And our third speaker is Mr. John Schreiner. He is a Senior Vice President of IMAX Corporation. John is based in Russia, joined IMAX in the year 2000, and is Senior Vice President, Theatre Development, IMAX Corporation. John has been involved in the leisure and entertainment business since 1996. So now let's start. We are divided this section for three speakers. Like John will speak about the international market, Mr. Alok will speak about the entire nationwide market, and Kiran will take up on the regional market. So let us start the session with Mr. John. Hi, John.
Hi, Raghav. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. John, how has this pandemic outbreak affected the cinema exhibition industries in global perspective?
Well, it's a really interesting time, obviously, for everybody, not only speaking on this call, but attending this call, given that it's probably the first time that cinemas virtually in every country are closed, and that there's very little revenue coming into to any business involved in the cinema business. So I'll give you an example. You know, IMAX operates in 82 countries around the world. We have over 1,500 screens, and today there's probably just a handful of theaters operating. So, you know, from a global perspective, pretty well the entire industry is shut down. You know, Hollywood is not producing any movies. There's no movies being screened in America. Same holds true for China. China's been shut since the end of January. So IMAX has a really interesting perspective, given that we operate globally, but we've actually been dealing with this virus situation since the end of January because our largest market on a global basis is China. So 600 IMAX theaters shut at the end of January. And there was talk about China reopening at the end of March. There was a tentative opening for a week or two. And then the theater shut down again. The guess today in terms of what's going to happen in China, and you know we can maybe extrapolate it for what may happen in India down the road, is that on the 1st of May there's a big May holiday. So there's a guess right now that China would reopen at that period of time. And the plan potentially would be to release older movies. That was the original plan a few weeks ago, that they'd release older movies in China, followed by some Chinese production, and then hopefully Hollywood product. But you know, that currently remains to be seen. Raghav?
Okay. In other countries, has there been any considerable aid from the government in their respective regions?
Well, on a global basis, you know, obviously pretty well every country is shut down. And it varies from country to country, and I'd be very curious to hear from Alok the views on what's going on in India, because, so for example, in America, there's been a big stimulus package for the economy, which includes various aids for the cinema business, including tax breaks, tax credits, and what have you. if anybody is interested in this call, there's a huge raft of resources on the National Association of Theater Owners website. It's natoonline.org, which is probably about 2 pages long of links to, how one can talk about and one can deal with getting access to that. And that's just only one country. I know, for example, in Russia, where I'm based, there was a package, stimulus package by the government for the entertainment business. Unfortunately, it didn't include cinemas, so cinemas were kind of shut out of that. So the cinemas are lobbying to try and benefit from that support fund, but right now there's no support from the government directly in Russia. In other markets in Europe, virtually every market in Europe has some sort of government support. And again, it varies from market to market, the level of amount and how it actually operates. Again, if there's somebody interested on that, there's a load of resources on the European Association of Cinema Operators, which is unique. I think it's uniquecinemas.org. That I'd recommend people check out if they're interested in how that could apply to an Indian context.
Then what are some of the ways in which cinemas are dealing with their high value equipments?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I'd encourage everybody on this call, if they haven't already done so, to talk to your cinema, equipment suppliers, or your integrators and what have you, because there's very specific instructions to power down your equipment. There's very specific instructions on how to ensure that your screens are maintaining their quality. There's very specific instructions, I think, also for, sound and audio and server equipment. So I would encourage everybody to, IMAX, for example, has a very detailed explanation that we've distributed to all of our clients. We've translated it into numerous different languages around the world, and supplied it for our technology. So I'd encourage everybody to talk to their suppliers as well.
Well, so what does the Hollywood's slate look like? How will theaters manage with content or the lack of it globally?
This is also an interesting question because I'd be very curious to understand how the Indian cinema business is going to function on a go forward basis, given that production is shut down and obviously all the theaters are shut down. Hollywood over the past few weeks has been reorganizing its release schedule, and a lot of major, barely a week goes by, barely a day goes by, I should say, that there hasn't been an announcement of a major Hollywood title getting a new date, getting moved away. So between now, and because IMAX is in the blockbuster business, I'm really kind of talking about the big blockbuster movies. But between now and July, there are really no major Hollywood releases on the release schedule. So as far as I'm aware, the first sort of big Hollywood movie that's planned to be released is the Christopher Nolan movie Tenet, which is in the middle of July. And I think the week following that, and that movie is released by Warner Brothers, and it'll be an amazing movie. And then the week following that is Disney's Mulan, which was originally supposed to be released in March. So the between now and the middle of July, the Hollywood release schedule is quite light. So, for example, if you're an Indian cinema operator and you have a big population who enjoys watching Hollywood movies, the big question to ask the local distributors is, if we open up, say, at the end of the month or in the middle of May, for example, what sort of content would you be able to supply from the Hollywood side of things until the big releases get back on slate? And so that's a dialogue that should be ongoing with your distribution partners.
What kind of communication is relevant and important to have with the customers as a service brand at this time like this? What kind of marketing can we do at this point?
Yeah, it's an interesting time in the industry because I think this is the first time in history that we know where all of our customers are. They're all sitting at home, and they're all, playing on their smartphones or their tablets on their devices. So there's a way to reach out and communicate. And communicate is, from my perspective, is very important and is key. Um, so, for example, there's many different ways that you want to ensure communication with your consumers to ensure that they remember to come back out to the cinemas when it's all said and done. So one example is there's a cinema chain in France who's has a big competition, on social media, and they've asked their consumers to at home reenact some of their iconic movie scenes, and from some of the movies that they want to see when the movie theaters reopen. So they're getting all sorts of interesting sort of videos. And the grand prize, I think, is a private screening of that movie with your friends once the theaters reopen. So it's a very I think important time, not only for suppliers to communicate to their partners in the industry, but for cinema chains to support the local consumers, and remind them that the cinema business is still going to be alive and well, and there's going to be some exciting stuff for people to watch later on in the year, and to make sure you sort of come back. And one thing I want to share with the audience is there's something that was done with a cinema group in Europe, which was a 5-point plan of how to address the COVID crisis. It was in English originally. We've translated it into Hindi, Tamil, and Telugu for the market. Obviously, step one is closure. Your cinemas are already closed, but it details a lot of things that you maybe should be thinking about during this time, which is a time that none of us have ever faced before. We're going to share the link in the comment box. I know there's links to this on LinkedIn as well. And I'd encourage you to share it with your friends and colleagues in the industry, because again, I think it's important for all of us to work together, because at the end of the day, we're all in this together. Raghav, listeners, there's going to be links to this. I'd encourage you to have a quick look. It's a 5-point plan to help navigate the coronavirus, and I apologize that it's not being shared on screen. Raghav, back to you.
Right. Thank you, John. Let us move to Mr. Alok. Sir, as one of the largest national chains of the country, tell us about the current situation that Indian industry is facing.
Well, Raghav, I've been talking to people and I've been discussing, and we all know what the current situation is. I would say that the situation which has emerged due to the outbreak of COVID-19 is absolutely unparalleled, unprecedented, and beyond the ambit of any business continuity plan. I don't think anybody could have even thought of it, that the world over cinemas would be shut. Not just the 2.5-decade-old history of multiplexes in India, but even the 100-odd years history of cinemas across the world. I don't think anybody has seen, as John was saying just now, a situation like this where everything has come to a grinding halt. And again, we discussed it in detail that one can have counter plans for a weak quarter. One can discuss what's happening in a recession period. One can see that what to do when the software is not good. But at times like this, when everything is stopped, it's really thinking out of the box to see that how do you continue with your business and take it forward. From the business point of view, we all know that the situation is alarming across all sectors, all businesses, all geographies. And cinema industry is no different. But as I always say that I always look at a silver lining in anything. I'm always an optimist. And what I feel that after we all emerge out of this, we all will be absolutely battle hardened. We'll be smarter, we'll be stronger, and we will be able, as a community, as a nation, as a world, able to face, I think, any crisis which comes across us or in front of us in future. So that's how I look at this scenario. We all have been talking about COVID-19, how it's affecting our health, how it's affecting our businesses, but I think it's a true human catastrophe. It is beyond words. You cannot just talk about this entire thing in P&L terms, in a balance sheet term. No, that's not possible. There's a human angle to, I would say, forget cinema, but all businesses across the world, rather.
So what is the strategy INOX has planned to cope this situation?
Well, I would say that quite a few of them. We have got our feet firmly on ground. INOX always was a company which used to look at every expense with a fine-tooth comb, and we are continuing to do so. We are looking at re-engineering the way we work, way we look at our different SOPs, the way we look at different verticals in our company. So everything is getting re-engineered. Rentals, as we all know, is one of the biggest line items of any company in any business. So here we are in touch with our landlords to ensure that we don't pay rent during these troubled times, and we've also invoked force majeure in our contracts. On the brand front, as John just now said, that there are chains who are engaging their guests. So I would say that we are doing the same. Whether it's on our Instagram or our Facebook or our Twitter handle, we have some quizzes for them. We have got some competitions. We have got crosswords. So something or the other to keep our guests engaged, and that's something which we are doing from the brand front of view. I've been in regular touch with all our colleagues across the country, Raghav. We have tried to communicate them the seriousness, not that they don't know, they are very well aware, but what the company is going through, what the industry is going through. So all those things, we are looking at the entire thing. And again, as I said, that we are planning to, or we are coping in such a way that when we emerge from this position and from these dark days, we get back to a normal buoyancy for which we are known, and we start doing what we do best, that is to show movies.
Right. So tell us about the plans set to restart operations back post the lockdown.
Yes, we are planning about it. We are talking about it. As I just said, that we are remaking, if I can use the word, remaking our SOPs, because what we feel is that today every vertical in a company has to be re-looked at with fresh eyes. And to simply put it in one line, I would say that besides ensuring hygiene and safety, we would be also trying to gain the confidence of our guests. And we have identified various ways to deal with it, Raghav. When I come to the operation front, I would say that we'll have to literally innovate a lot of things. We'll have to look at the new word which has now become, I would say it's in everybody's language and social distancing, the word which is being used. So we will have to start that in our cinemas. We may have to carry out temperature checks, and not have to carry out, but I think we will carry out non-invasive temperature checks for people who enter our multiplexes, whether they are guests, our vendors, our staff, anybody who walks into the doors. We will have hand sanitizers placed everywhere across the shop floor, and that will become a new norm, I think. We will do deep cleaning and disinfecting of our entire premises, more than what we used to do earlier. We could have, and I think we will have, a cross allocation of seats so that no two people sit together. Lots of measures I think we can talk about, we will be looking at, and these are just a few which I'm talking to you about, including I think that we'll be doing our programming in such a way that no two shows clash. We have less crowd at the concession counter, we have less crowd at the box office, and we have less crowd in the washrooms. So we'll be staggering our show timings. So all these things, what we've thought of, and as of now, we have got teams who are working on these things, that once we start operations, how do we ensure that our guests feel comfortable coming to INOX and watching the picture with us?
Raghav, can I just ask Alok a question just in this?
Yeah,
Kiran. Yeah,
go ahead, Kiran.
please.
Go ahead, Kiran, please. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Alok, we talk about social distancing, and yet cinema is a social experience. And there's an inherent contradiction between the two.
Sure.
How do you think we're going to deal with that?
Well, I totally agree with you that one side we are saying it's a social affair, and now we are talking about social distancing. As I said, that these are there's a new terminology which has seeped into everybody's conversation in the last, I would say, 3 or 4 weeks. But having said that, Kiran, I would say that we would be coming to theaters for sure. We would love to see a movie on a large screen. That's in our DNA. That's in the DNA of us Indians. And yes, for a period of time, even families who come would appreciate that they're sitting a seat away, whether from their family members or from their or other people who are in the theater. So I think, Kiran, that it could be a new norm for the first couple of months, and then things could change. And you're right that watching a movie is a social affair. Even now it will be. We'll be all going out together. But true enough, sitting a few feet away from each other. But that will not take away the pleasure of watching a movie together or what's happening on the screen to enjoy it all together. So that's how I look at it.
Yeah. Right.
Raghav, go ahead.
Yeah. Has there been any support rendered by the Indian government or Multiplex Association for the exhibition market?
Raghav, where Multiplex Association is concerned, we have given representations to the government. We have given representations to various ministries, and we've asked for a couple of things. We have asked for, number one, interest-free loans. What we have said is that please provide us loan for 3 years with a 1-year moratorium. That will help the multiplexes a lot. We have asked for various exemptions in terms of duties and taxes, whether it's a GST, whether it's a show tax, a local body entertainment tax, property tax. We are saying that from the time cinemas start operating, please give us a 1-year time till we don't pay these taxes. We have also asked for a waiver in electricity duty. We all know that electricity is a huge P&L item. And we've asked the government that, yes, what we consume, we'll surely pay on actuals, but do not have a minimum demand charge for some time after we start. And also, we all know that multiplexes are very people intensive. We have told the government or asked the government to provide assistance for cinemas to reimburse the employees' salaries for the non-operational period and help us out in these troubled times. So these are the demands we have made to the government, and let's see that when we can hear a positive response from them. Raghav.
Okay. So how can a multiplex chain stay afloat during this time when revenues are dropped to zero?
You're right. It's a tough thing. These are tough times for everybody. These are testing times for everybody. And ours is a very operational and a customer-focused business. So this is a business where if you don't have anything happening at the shop floor, your people are absolutely ineffectual. They have nothing to do. And I would say in a cinema industry, nearly 100% of the people today are doing nothing. They have not much work to do because all the action, as I said, is at the shop floor. So we are looking at various ways. And I said earlier that we are going through our entire P&L with a fine-tooth comb to ensure that we minimize all our fixed expenses because you only said revenues are absolutely zero, which is right. And we are working towards that when situation comes back to normalcy, then we go back with a new plan, a new thought process, and ensure that we at the same time keep on cutting, not cutting costs, but minimizing costs so that whatever hit our bottom line is taken recuperates over a period of time. So that's how I look at it, Raghav.
So my next question is to Mr. Kiran. Yeah, you had a larger experience working in the regional sector. How different are the issues that regional players will face compared to national ones, especially with issues pertaining to staff, inventory, and security of the premises?
On those fronts, I don't think they'll be very different from the national players. But I think there's two fundamental differences between regional players and national players. One is regional players depend a lot more on regional content, and you're going to see regional content behaving differently than national content. And the reason is that regional movies, a large part of them, at least in Tamil Nadu, are made by people who are independent producers in some context and not studios. So the question is, do they have the ability to weather this entire situation? If they're during the production, can they hold a movie for that long? What will they do? Will they send it directly to OTT? So these are things that we'd have to think through. So that's one difference. The second is that even the cinema operators tend to have a lot more independent cinemas in the southern part of India. Now, my feeling is that the independent cinema operators may survive because they own the real estate. When you own real estate, even some bit of losses, you can probably borrow against that real estate. So that could be a reason why some of them might survive, but a lot of them might even consider why they should even continue within the industry, and might even consider breaking down the cinema and and selling it as real estate or doing something else. So I think there will be some cinemas that will be demolished. Unfortunately, what's going to happen is the real estate sector is also not going to be good. So the alternate use itself is not going to be particularly great. But people with very low debt and people who own assets will be able to get through this period. People who are highly leveraged will find it difficult to borrow capital, and I think borrowing capital is going to get extremely difficult. I think the larger corporates are probably going to be able to access capital to some extent. I would say small and medium enterprises are going to find it extremely difficult to borrow capital, and they will end up borrowing capital at really high rates. So it's going to be challenging for some of the independent players, but if it's really they're counting on the real estate value that they have. In terms of the other issues regionally, I don't think they're any different from national issues. The issues of restarting or issues of securing a premises or any of them. I don't think that's fundamentally different, except that independent cinemas have a different way of of protecting their own premises. This is operated usually within malls, and the malls themselves could be considered to be reasonably secure, so they don't have to take care of it. But I sense that that's the least of the problems that you're facing right now. Today, it's really, I think what I'm seeing this as is really a survival issue. There are businesses that are going to survive. There are lots of them that are going to die during this process. There are businesses that are going to survive, and the ones that survive will end up being a lot more resilient as a result of this.
Okay, and many studios have postponed the productions, and some have even given their existing content to the OTTs. What's your take on this?
If I'm sitting on the side of a producer, I'll do what I need to do to survive. And so if I have a movie, for example, that's that cannot be played in cinemas, I can't support. You're going to get a couple of people. You're going to get some independent people who cannot afford to postpone their movie. They cannot afford to bear the the interest, and the interest rates in South India on movie production can go as high as maybe 36 to 48%. So a delay in releasing the movie could be actually could be complete destruction of the producer. He's going to do what he's going to do to actually monetize this thing, and you can't. I think in some way we shouldn't pass judgment on people who do that. Studios can be a lot more resilient. They could be a lot more tactical. They could make decisions on when to release their movies. So I think we should take an independent producer in a different category than a studio, and I think at least the independent producers treat them with a level of kindness that they will not be able to survive otherwise. I think all of us are doing things to at least first protect ourselves. The second thing I'm just saying that I think this is of consideration to everybody within the cinema industry, and especially to people like you, Alok, in that you're going to survive and you're going to thrive after. But a lot of your vendors, supplies in the ecosystem may or may not survive. And where possible, see if you can actually help the vendor ecosystem. First, take care of yourselves, because that's the only way you can protect somebody else. But when you take care of yourselves, find ways in which you can, support, especially the small enterprises. That I would say a lot of small and medium enterprises will not be, and that is really, really unfortunate. And that's the backbone of the entire country.
Right, I totally agree with you, Kiran. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, no, I agree. Can I, Raghav, can I just make one comment a little bit about Kiran's point on streaming? The good news, at least from the Hollywood perspective, is that for the vast majority of Hollywood movies, they're being redated. They're not actually going straight to the streaming platforms. There's been a couple movies, for example, Trolls World Tour, I think. which went, it was released day and date, and it irritated a lot of cinema operators around the world. I think there's only been one sort of major release, and it's a Disney movie called Artemis Fowl, which had moved a couple times already, that I think Disney decided to put it straight onto their Disney Plus platform. But I'll give you an example of what Kiran was saying about producers having to do what they need to do, and it comes from China, it comes from Russia, in that there was a movie that was supposed to be released in late April, and the producer had two big blockbuster movies that they'd released as well earlier in the year, but the cinema operators hadn't yet fully paid the studio what they needed to for these two blockbuster movies. So when it came time for them to start paying back people for this movie that they were supposed to release in April, they needed to make a decision. How are they going to release it? Where are they going to release it? And they couldn't wait for the cinemas. So they released it straight to video. Now, the unfortunate thing is that there was no sort of group communication that said, hey, can you guys understand we're doing this? It's not that we don't support cinemas. It's we need to do what we need to do to survive. But, you know, we support cinemas long term, which I believe that producer did. So if there's any producers on the call, I would highly recommend that if they have to make that decision, that they make sure that they communicate with the industry so that they understand their motivations behind moving to streaming. But it does seem that in general there's a big protection for the theatrical window, which is fantastic.
I still think in India, I think having a theatrical window and then going on OTT is still the most optimal way of releasing a movie. So it probably will be different in different markets. So I can still see from a producer's perspective that would be the what is desired to do, but in some situations just would be unable to do.
Right. Going back to Mr. Alok, Angre's Medium was the last Hindi movie released before the big lockdown. So this movie has been there in OTT from past 2 days. So what do you say about this?
Nothing. As John just now said, that somebody should have been taken into confidence, and people should take exhibitors into confidence. For example, we also came to know 2 days ago, like you came to know, that the movie has released on OTT. So that came as a shock to all exhibitors and everybody in India.
Right. Kiran, how do you think government regulation can help the industry during this time?
That's a tough one. I know Alok's asked for a long request of things, but I think the government's getting requests from every side. And if I have to think about the priorities, I think the government's priorities should be first to take care of people who are, the daily wage earners and the migrant labor who are just out of a job and are really dealing with survival issues. And I think that needs to get prioritized before small and medium enterprises. And then we come to large companies. Not that I'm saying that large companies don't deserve it, but I think that large companies will survive and will have other ways to do it. I think some of the others simply won't. So in putting a request across, and I think, everyone's going to put the request. Everyone wants the government to do all that it can to actually. The government's not going to be able to support everyone through all their requests. I think they will have to prioritize, and I somehow believe the priority in this country will probably end up, at least, to make people survive first before you even, worry about other things. And I think the government should do some quantitative easing. They should print currency and do that, because I don't think we're in an inflationary stage. I don't think demand's going up very, quickly. I don't think people are going to go out there and spend money, quickly. So I think we can afford to do something which is probably a once-in-a-lifetime issue and deal with it very differently from how we deal with things. And I have a company in the US, and that company has applied for a small business loan. And I think the US government has actually been a lot more proactive on that and providing loans and potentially grants for employing people, similar to what Alok has asked. I just don't know whether our government can afford the same things as the US government.
To the participants, if you wanted to post any questions, just go to the Q&A session. There's a button called Q&A. You can post the questions there. So once after all the questions of us, we will come back to that.
Again, it's more general. I think we really have to look at the cinema industry in three different phases. The first phase is really a survival phase. Through the shutdown period, how you're going to lose money every month. How do you make sure that you're liquid enough? How do you have enough cash flow to just pay for whatever the minimal expenses you need to pay to sustain your business? The second phase is a transition phase where you have to get people where and I think the transition phase is probably going to continue till there's a clear resolution of this, which is probably 12 to 18 months away when the vaccine is available. In between, we're going to go through some start stops. We're going to go through some periods of, lack of. During that period, we're going to have diminished cash flow. We're going to have people who are not confident enough to come to the movie theater. So there's a whole strategy about how do you bring people into a movie theater? How do you get them comfortable with coming out of home? How do you make them feel as secure as possible? And how do you bring them back, to even socializing? It's not just the movie industry; it's just even getting out of home and actually even socializing to a certain extent. And then long term, you're really concerned about have habits significantly shifted? Is COVID just a temporary blip, or has there been some fundamental shift in habits? And what we're hoping for is there are no serious fundamental shift in habits. That yes, OTTs are playing an important part, but they don't become the primary or the only consumption. I wouldn't say only consumption because there's always going to be a need for theatrical consumption. But I think the threshold for going out to a movie shouldn't be so high that it's only for the big blockbusters that people will come. What you want them to come out is for, ideally I would like people to come out like the way I used to. I mean, I think sometimes I kind of miss the period where you could go and watch the movies that you get on OTT today in a screen. And I think with Hollywood, you're beginning to see that whole shift towards only blockbusters. And you rarely see the non-blockbusters in screens, not to the same extent that it was earlier. I've not seen a romantic comedy in a movie theater for a long while. And it used to be a mainstay at probably 10, 15 years ago. And I'm worried that shift will push us more towards blockbusters. The theatrical experience is a fantastic experience for certain types of movies. It should be a fantastic experience for any sort of movie. But unfortunately, that's my worry. And I'm hoping that, as an industry, we do things to keep the bar high enough to get people in on a regular basis.
No, I agree with you, Kiran. If I can just activate, you're absolutely right that we have to keep the bar high. And that's where you see that all the multiplex operators and you especially, when you were running Satyam, you did some great job for which I say is decouching people, that we are decouching people, telling them to come out of their houses and come to cinema halls. And we are pampering them with luxury, with technology, and with service. And that, I think, will continue to happen. That'll continue to happen. And true enough, you rightly said that there's some movies which are only enjoyed on the large screen. There is no way that you can watch a movie alone and watching it on your tab. And when you said that watching a movie is a social experience, I think that will always be there. So this is just a blip. I see this as a blip, a 3-4 month blip maybe. And after that, things will start coming to normal because we as humans, we are an outgoing people. We will like to go out with family, friends, relatives, and go and eat outside, go for picnics, go for hiking, and also go and watch movies. So I may be wrong when I say that it'll continue to happen and only blockbusters will come on a large screen. I doubt that. I think that we are not far away, maybe a couple of months only, where people again throng back to cinema halls, to restaurants, to pubs, and to various places where we have been going earlier. But you're right, but there'll be a sense of, I would say, a concern that I hope where I'm going, and that will be for the initial few months after the lockdown opens, is whether I'm entering a safe environment, whether I'm entering a hygienic place. So all those things will be there.
Alok and Kiran, do you think that cinema design will change going forward? To take into account additional hygienic, I guess accoutrements, design. Any thoughts on that?
I don't know whether the design would change or not. But yes, there'll be a few features which will be more visible. Today, when we go to cinema, we have got a fire hydrant kept. We all know where fire hydrants are there, so that in case of emergency, you can use them. Now we'll know where sanitizers are kept, so that you can go and just clean your hands. That's how I look at it. But per se, the design of a cinema may not undergo a change. But yes, people will become more conscious. People will be, as we are frisked in India when we enter the cinema hall, naturally we'll be asked to sanitize our hands, whether it's for anybody, our guests, our staff, the people who work over there. So that's how I look at it. There'll be more deep cleaning taking place. There'll be more sterilization, if that's the right word to use, but cleaning seats, cleaning carpets, ensuring that all the housekeeping, the SOPs are in place and are being adhered to in letter and in spirit. That's how I see it.
If you were to redesign a cinema for the new context, I believe the cinema could be designed slightly differently. Now, whether that's possible or not is going to be, I don't think it's going to be possible for most locations to adapt and change their design. Of course, you would have, for example, larger seats which would enable, social distancing anyway to happen. You could have less human contact. When I say less human contact, I would say that in today's environment, people would rather that they pick up things themselves from a hygienic environment, rather than be served by somebody else. But I don't know if this trend is going to continue. The hope is that within 12 to 18 months, people come back to some reasonable set of normal behavior. And when it comes back to normal behavior, you still want social interaction. You're still comfortable with, those sort of interactions. And you don't see the virus and hygiene as being as critical as it is during this particular. So I don't know if I would go and redesign for a period that I'm uncertain that will last for more than a couple of years.
Okay.
Okay. Kiran, what are the things that theatre owners must think about when they reopen the cinemas?
I think a lot of cinema owners are going to probably let go of it. If this continues for a longer time. And that's going to be, I think with the smaller cinemas, they probably, the role of the people are pretty much transactional. So it's easy to get people back on. With multiplexes, it just drags on for a longer period, and if they let go of people, then they have to get people back into training. They have to get, people. It doesn't take particularly long, but sometimes you lose. When people are used to operating in a particular way, there's some inherent, memory of that knowledge that's built up within the organization. And once you let go of, people, I think then, getting them to sync again, it's not as quick and easy. So my sense is that even when people are letting go, so I would genuinely believe that people, rather than letting people go, it might even be better to actually pay everybody a partial salary, which is what a lot of people are doing, which is, across the world, which is, pay them 50, 75% of the salary so they can still survive during this period, rather than letting people go who cannot get a job. And I think that part is going to be a bit of a problem in the restarting if you do not, you'll miss some of the good people. If some of the good people might leave, it might be difficult to get them back on. So I would say that is it. I think, then you have simple teething starting trouble of, making sure that the supply chain is, like a lot of your vendors are going to disappear. You're not going to have the same vendors as you would have had earlier. Some of your supply chain, you have to check and see if your supply chain is, is active. Sometimes I keep wondering, the two things that can shut, or three things that can shut a cinema down. Oddly, one of them will be, light bulbs. So if you don't have, your projector bulbs available, and that supply chain got disrupted somehow, then actually you have there's no way you can show a movie. So it's the odd things that can suddenly shut down your business. I have a friend, for example, he has a component that probably cost $1,000, and because of what happened in China and the supply chain in China, that his factory, which is probably a $10-15 million factory, was unable to operate for months because of that situation. And you could have odd situations like this. So I think restarting, what you really want to do is just check to see if the basics are in place, if there's enough of a supply chain of basics. Maybe nobody started producing bulbs for a while, and then there's some inventory available, and then that inventory got used up and people bought it, and then you don't have visibility on your supply chain. So it's little things like that. But I think the bigger issues is that a lot of small entities are going to disappear. So if you have a lot of small, entities as part of your ecosystem, who's a vendor for your food, who's a vendor for, a service provider, who's coming and servicing your air conditioning or, your equipment, just check on them periodically to see, are they still okay? Are they alive? Do they intend to continue, business? Do you have an alternate plan? If you don't, so it's those little things of, ensuring you have to go back to the basics and say, do I have the things we've taken for granted may not necessarily be there. We've been so used to an ecosystem where everything is available for us on a call and people are there to support us. Those same people may not be available, so check on all of that before you get started.
Kiran, do you think we will continue to face the impact of coronavirus for the rest of the year? What are some steps that the industry can take to the effects of coronavirus in the future?
That's a tough one. I don't think it's an industry problem. I think it's a societal problem, and I think the industry cannot deal with situations like that. There's no way that the industry could solve for situations like that. I think the world is going to change on that front. I think we will have the tools and the ability to spot viruses very quickly. It's possible that you might have devices at home before you step out of home that you'll be able to, like you have any other appliance, you might have an appliance that tells you if you have a virus or a bacteria that you shouldn't go out. I think there will be certain things that enable us, or there may be, right now you're doing, temperature checks, but I think temperature checks are going to be insufficient in this scenario because that's only when you're showing a symptom. So if you're asymptomatic, you will not be able to know that. But I think even enterprises will start beginning to put those appliances in place where when you're coming to a social environment that you could be checked for a certain setup. So I think society, I think we will find solutions as society. I think we've rise. I think we've taken this, the risk of a pandemic very lightly earlier. And I think Bill Gates has been talking about it for a while. And I think this is the positive side to this is that we're going to find a way not to go back to the same issue, again. But I don't think it's an industry problem to deal. It's a societal problem.
And just to add to it, for multiplexes, for example, hygiene was always a norm. It was never that it was not a norm. Hygiene was always a norm. And now's the time when we have to just reinforce it, to reinsure that things are being done properly, as I earlier said. And just bang it in that it has to be cleanliness, and cleanliness, whether it's for us or whether it's for people who are coming in and spending time with us in our cinema theaters.
How can we use this downtime to improve operations and utilize our teams who work from home? This question might be for Alok or Kiran. Anybody can take this.
Yeah, well, let me tell you that today people are working from home. It's not that we are not working from home, though. I earlier said that most of our work is at the shop floor. But I've also said that we are redesigning all our SOPs. We are challenging ourselves because we all know the world will not be the same again, as Kiran also said just now, that things will be different. It's not that we'll go back to those hunky-dory days immediately. We have to ensure that when we come back with a different thought process, with a different way of looking at the same thing which we took for granted earlier. So today it has to be looked at a different way. And all these things, Raghav, will be put down on a piece of paper, which people are doing, will be templatized, and will be shared across. So that's how I'm looking at it, that every item, everything, even a small thing like selling a samosa, the way will change. How? I don't have an answer today, but our teams today are looking at every item, every way of working, every process which we have, and we're challenging all those. We are challenging. I don't know whether this is the right thing to even compare, but let's say what happened during the demonetization. People learned the art of using plastic money. Today we have all wallets. We have different types of payment mechanisms, and I think most of them use them. Most of us use them. So things have changed. So things have changed drastically since the demonetization, where handling of currency was concerned. And I think today with the outbreak of this COVID-19, which is a terrible thing, but the way we clean ourselves, the hygiene standards, the business, the way we attack or look at our business, everything will change. And here I'm not only talking about the cinema industry, I'm talking about various industries, various businesses across India as well as other geographies.
I'll echo that from our perspective. IMAX is having many internal discussions in terms of how can we do things better, how can we do things differently. And I'd encourage everybody on this call to look at their cinema business differently, because I think we're all a bit crazy if at the end of this period where we're forced to kind of be locked in our homes and work from home, I think we're all a little bit crazy if we go back to doing things exactly the same way. because I can guarantee you, I'm sure if we all spend a little bit of time thinking about our collective businesses, we can kind of come up with some unique and innovative things to ensure that all of our businesses are healthy going forward.
So I can add to that by saying that if I were running cinemas right now, I would, especially a large cinema chain, one of the things I would do, I've never had downtime like this. It's actually fantastic from certain standpoints. I mean, to have a cinema not operating, it's a business that runs continually, so you never have the time to do certain things which are very, very strategic or structural. For example, you can't have your your IT systems down. Okay, it was just not a possibility to have an IT system down. And suddenly you have a month where you can actually completely upgrade all the things that you needed to upgrade. You may have a couple of weeks where you can actually do that. That luxury we've never had for such a long time. And I think these are the things that we can actually potentially do. Is what are the things that require downtime that we've never been able to have, and how do we do that as a restoration center? Unfortunately, it's coming at a time where you're trying to preserve cash flow. But it's actually the best time to actually upgrade your cinema, or not just renovate, but at least even refurbish the cinema, because there's always cinemas that are going to be things that need to be fixed. Those are the things that I would suggest that focus on. As far as individuals are concerned, I can break them into two categories. One of it is corporate staff, and the other is line staff. Now, with corporate staff, I think you can focus on, like what Alok said, relooking at processes and changing them and optimizing the way you do things, because you've never had a chance for them to step back. They've always been running, and they've never had a chance to step back and think about why they're doing what they're doing. And the second part of it is to focus on their own development. A lot of times we have people that are us employees don't have enough time, or we've not put the emphasis on their own personal development. That they're actually more focused on doing things. And actually, if they're sitting at home, maybe they should be spending a certain percentage of time growing as individuals, in a more holistic manner. With people on the front line, I would imagine the same thing, that, is there certain types of training, or is there certain things that we can get them to do at home? The one thing is, if people don't know English, could they just learn, the English language in a month where there is downtime? If that is the one thing that they actually end up learning, if they learn to do that fluently, or they learn to communicate fluently, that itself will give them confidence when they come back, into the thing. So I think because we were not geared up for this, I think it's very difficult for companies to immediately have a plan. But it's be wonderful if the HR teams of larger companies can actually start thinking about, I still have these resources. They're there. They're just not being usefully employed. How can I help them grow, at least in this period, because they can't actually do work.
That's all from my questions. So let us take some questions from the Q&A. Kiran, this question I can give it to you. What will be the impact on investment decision that exhibitors are contemplating?
I'm not sure what that question is trying to trying to point to. But within the industry, for example, people are going to relook at capex. People are going to look at new sites. I think that the move towards profitability is going to be a lot greater than market share and revenue and all those aspects. I think cash flow is. I think there'll be an emphasis on cash flow. So I think the other thing that I see is actually return expectations are going to be much higher. If I'm going to go do a site, if I was in the cinema business, I would relook at my threshold for doing a site. I'll let Alok answer that. But in this context, this is the way I would.
No, you're absolutely right. Capex allocation will be looked at thoroughly. It's not that what we spent earlier, we'll continue doing it. Every rupee spent will be really looked at why we are doing it. What's the IRR? As you rightly said, that the expectations have to be higher now, the returns have to be higher. And also adding to the other thing, what about our expansion? Because a lot of money goes in expansion. So that's another thing which companies will have to look at. What I feel that, yes, for the first couple of months, the openings of cinemas will be deferred. I'm not saying that they'll be just put off, but they'll be deferred. The rollovers or the expansion will be slightly deferred. But in the long run, and as we are always optimistic, in the long run, maybe next a couple of quarters, 3, 4, 5 quarters, things will come back to normal, and that the expansion plans of various companies will stay intact. It's not that they will not stay intact, especially of large chains will do. But initially, yes, there could be a slight issue with opening cinemas, not because of capex or because of money, but because of everything coming to a grinding halt as of now. Whether it's construction, whether it's interiors, whether it's the labor who has gone back. So there'll be a delay from every side before we, again, I think, start pressing the pedal hard.
Fine. Hope we addressed all the required queries, and thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Alok, John, and Mr. Kiran. Our next webinar is going to be on cinema equipment management. So during this lockdown, how do you manage your equipment so that there won't be any problem when you open the cinemas? So for more info, visit cineconf.com. And thank you all again.